Prodigal by Carbon65, a Batman Under the Red Hood fanfic, rated for teen and up audiences, with additional tags for Jason Todd lives, Jason Todd is Red Hood, Bruce Wayne doesn't kill, Jason Todd needs a hug, cross-posted on Tumblr, Tumblr prompt, no dialogue, I wrote this instead of sleeping, and no beta, we die like robins. This is part 1 in Luke 15:11 through 32. Summary. Jason never died. Jason was never resurrected. He joined a book club instead of the League of Assassins and gained influence at the Gotham Boys and Girls club. And somehow, Jason Todd is still the Red Hood. Jason didn't mean to get captured. He was out, taking care of business, when Superman came and picked him up and dragged him here. The Zeta tube sucked, and he's glad that they have him sitting, because he's not sure he could stand. He lets them take off his helmet, but is thankful when he gets to keep his domino. He'd like to preserve as much of his anonymity as he can. Even rogues should be allowed that privilege. The room is uncomfortable, and he accepts the water Diana offers. She wouldn't poison a prisoner. She might stab him, but she wouldn't poison him. He sips the water, and he feels antsy. They're waiting for someone. He knows when Bruce walks in the room. His father has a presence, both as Batman and as Bruce. They're different sides of the same coin, and they're both comforting. Or they should be. Jason doesn't know if he can face his father. Nightwing, Dick Grayson, follows, a different kind of warm presence. Dick is wild and fun and charismatic. He'll draw you in and hold you. He'll also mock you and literally climb the walls and never stop talking. Jason braces himself and opens his mouth. He can explain. He can. His brother just has to shut up long enough for him to do so, which, given who his brother is, might take a while. Maybe it started when he was 11 with his crowbar, trying to pry the tires off the Batmobile, and Batman took him home. There was the night he crept down to the basement and discovered the Batcave. The kind of cave that competed with Aladdin's for treasures. He'd sat at the computer and waited all night for Bruce to return, and when he had, Jason had told him that he wanted to be Robin, and Bruce had made that very Bruce face and ignored him. Maybe it started when he was 12, newly minted as a part of the dynamic duo, and patrolling the streets of Gotham. The Joker was there. The Joker was angry. The Joker was terrorizing Gotham. Maybe it started when he was 13 and the Narrows was a mess. There were kids he knew, kids he'd gone to school with, who were in trouble. They were going missing. Older sisters, mostly, but a few older brothers, mostly the pretty ones, and then a few of his classmates. He'd told Bruce. He'd told Batman. He'd told Commissioner Gordon and Alfred and anyone he could find. And they just shrugged and said that's what happens in Crime Alley in the Narrows. People left, their families moved away, and they didn't tell Jason. Older siblings went to college, or to new jobs with significant others, or moved on with their lives, and even though Jason knew something was wrong, insisted something was terribly wrong, no one would listen. Bruce just got that pinched expression on his face, the one he wore when Alfred said that he had to go to a gala instead of spending money, when Jason tried to convince him to patrol there, and they didn't go. And the friends kept disappearing. Maybe it started when he was 14, in Ethiopia, trying to rescue a woman who both gave birth to him and hated him from a terrorist clown. He doesn't remember much after the Joker started after Jason, with his own crowbar. He had a plan to work Robin over, starting at his feet, so he couldn't crawl away, and ending at his head. And then there would be a bomb. It wasn't armed when the Joker started, and it wasn't armed when Batman fought off the Joker and carried Robin's limp body out to the hospital. Maybe it started when he was 15 and still shaky on his crutches. His knees and pelvis were nearly destroyed, and he still wasn't able to walk without some kind of support. He used a wheelchair often, but his physical therapist had been pushing him to walk more, both because it was good for him and because it might help him grow. He was coming back from an outing to one of the public gun ranges with Babs. They were both learning to shoot, with mobility aids. He was learning for the first time with his crowbar-damaged hands. The ex-cop who was teaching them thought that they could both be good shots, if they could figure out some of the basic safety things. like remembering to put the brakes on their wheelchairs before firing things, with a kick. Babs contended that having her chair move improves her experience of guns, with kickback. Jason was limping back into his house, trying to hide the smell of gun oil on his hands, when he ran into a new boy. The kid knocked him over and then scurried off before he had the decency to see if Jason needed help, which he didn't, but he still should have been asked. He knows why the kid was there. He's not stupid, but he also refuses to acknowledge that Bruce might have found a replacement for him. Maybe it started when he was 16, stuck at home on a day when the pain was so bad he could barely pull himself out of bed. Alfred had given him a muscle relaxant to see if it would help at all, or maybe just make him sleep. Pain made him tired. Being tired increased his pain. Pain meant he couldn't sleep because all he could think about was how badly everything hurt. The muscles around the ruined bones and ligaments bunched and twisted, the frayed nerves screaming, and he couldn't take anything for it, because there was nothing to take. Nothing could heal the disconnect or even ease the pain. It was only heat, and something to stop the cramping, and the careful dance of propping him up on pillows until he could find a position that hurt less. Early in the afternoon, he finally pulled himself from bed and moved over to the wheelchair that sat waiting for him. He was mostly walking, except for on really bad days, like that one. He was tired of being alone with his pain, so he went to the TV room, where Tim was playing video games. Jason has no idea why 12-year-old Tim was there. As far as Jason knew, even though Tim was a vigilante at night, he was still legally Janet and Jack Drake's responsibility, and he should have been at their house, or in school. Except that they were never home to make Tim go to school, and Tim didn't go to school unless he wanted to. He was at some kind of weird private school. Jason, who went to Catholic High, for no reason other than that all of his friends from St. Ignatius had gone there, and he'd begged. Didn't understand a school without grades, or strict class schedules, or mandatory volunteer hours, but Tim's parents seemed okay with it, which is why Tim was now haunting Jason's favorite spot on his favorite couch, the only place in the TV room, other than his wheelchair, that he could tolerate on days like these. Tim had glared when he'd been asked to move, and said something nasty and cutting, like only a 12-year-old can. Jason can remember every word of the accusation, that Bruce keeps Jason around out of guilt and duty and nothing else. He can remember the feeling of failure, of shame, of the way, among all three of Bruce's sons, he was the only one not in the family business, because he was the only one who was too broken. He'd solved the problem by punching Tim as hard as he could. His legs might be messed up, but he did a lot of PT, and his upper body was still strong. It was worth it to see Tim slinking around the manor with a black eye for the next week while he was grounded. Maybe it started when he was 17 and... But fine. He'll get to the point. He started when he was newly 21. Headed into his junior year at GSU, he thought his body had plateaued. He was finally tall enough that people didn't assume he was 12, and he was doing well in school. And then disaster, like always, came in threes. First, there had been an unfortunate incident with Bruce, getting lost in the time stream, or whatever. It's easy to ignore your dad's extracurricular activities by putting your fingers in your ears and humming, or, if you're Jason, by using your full ride to move into a small, handicap-accessible dorm room on GSU's campus, and getting a part-time job in a local garage that keeps you working during prime vigilante hours. It's easy to ignore the family business if you're smart about it. It's hard to ignore your father's death. It's hard to ignore your oldest brother moving back into town and making up with your librarian. It's hard to ignore how things got just a little darker. And it's hard to ignore your younger brother going crazy from grief or guilt or whatever because he was alone again. So, there was that. Jason was in mourning over something he could neither explain nor control, and his family was falling apart, and he had no one to blame. The new Batman could barely manage the city. He tried, but Gotham didn't love him the same way it loved his father. Or maybe Gotham found him fickle, changing costumes in cities like clothes and air, wasn't sure she could trust him, and so Gotham was on edge, and her people felt it, and things got worse. Then there had been the X-ray. He'd done something stupid and fallen off a friend's bike. Yes, he knew he wasn't supposed to be riding the bike, but if he didn't get across campus, he was going to miss his 21st century American Lit seminar, and as much as he doesn't love Steinbeck, he loves the professor. He'd hit something, a pebble, maybe, on the sidewalk, and he and the bike fell on the hard cement sidewalk. If he'd been anyone else, or fallen any other way, it would have been fine. Dick or Tim would have walked away with scraped hands and maybe a small cut on their cheek, and would have forgotten about it as soon as their face healed and their hands stopped stinging. But he was Jason, and he had survived the Joker, and his body was broken in a way neither of his brothers were. The fall knocked something loose in his reconstructed pelvis, not enough to notice past the bruise, at least, not at first. Jason remembers limping into his class 10 minutes late, under Dr. Karanga's watchful, disappointed eye, and collapsing into the empty desk. He remembers struggling to get up, now under Karanga's and T.A. Brenda's careful gaze, and lying that he was fine. He remembers coming home from a late-night study session in pain, and waking up with wet sheets, unable to move, while his neighbor played the latest, greatest song of the summer, the one that resembled the Joker, and made him want to hide in his bed at the manor, while Bruce rubs his back and promises that it will be okay. Except that his dad was dead and couldn't come to comfort him here, and wouldn't be there when he woke up from another surgery he didn't want. And Jason knew who to blame. Jason knew exactly who to blame. The third thing that happened was Caitlin Sandmore. Caitlin was a little girl in the Big Brothers Big Sisters program he volunteered with. She was 13, maybe? Sweet like those atomic warhead candies Damien likes. The ones that you suck on until your cheeks hurt, and then you get the flavor underneath once you get through the protective coating. She was unremarkable, the kind of girl who drew catboys in the margins of her notebook, and dreamed of marrying some kind of musician, and wanted to grow up to be a nurse, or a YouTuber, or maybe a bus driver. She should have had time to figure it out, except that Caitlin got caught up in whatever bullshit was going down in the Narrows. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she didn't make it home. And no one cared. No one came to avenge her. Jason's trust fund paid for the stone and the obituary, and Jason got angry. It started like that, with a dead girl and a dead father, and the city in shambles. Batman and Gotham were in a tenuous peace. There was some new drama with Robin, the appearance of a child with shocking green eyes and Bruce's jaw, and a slightly hooked nose. He was arrogant, formal, shabby, and just as angry as the rest of them. And he was making Tim crazy. Dick and Alfred had too much to do, holding together the family in appearance and themselves, and the normal give and take of the city. Gotham might be Batman's, but the Narrows could be his. It turns out, it's surprisingly easy to set up a drug cartel if you have a few $100,000 to invest and know how to use a gun from all sorts of positions. Gotham City is filled with desperate people, willing to trade whatever they have for safety, for an escape, or just a few minutes of beauty. As much as Wayne Enterprises has saved much of the city, plenty of people were left behind, and those people, the ones who lived in neighborhoods that had been marked off on the map in red ink, they were his. And then people whose bodies were broken, not just because of a madman, but because life can be cruel, they were his. And the children who went to bed hungry, because there was no money for food, they were his too. He could let the boys who lived in his dead father's house squabble over being a hero in a bright cape. He had left his days of being a hero behind. His city didn't need a hero, but it needed someone, and he could be that person. And he's not sorry. He can't be sorry. He knows Bruce looks at every villain and sees someone who can be saved. Bruce is constantly seeking mercy, and damn it, Jason admires him for it. Jason wishes he could be as good as the man who raised him. But Jason, he looks at the people around him, and he sees victims. And victims deserve justice, and he can bring some of that justice. A different justice than what Batman has. One that the state would provide, if good cop wasn't an oxymoron. But the world isn't the kind written into the storybooks Jason reads to the kids in Crime Alley. The world is the way it is, harsh and cold and cruel. Gotham City needs mercy, but she also needs justice, and she's happier to have him. She was happy to have Spoiler when the blonde girl ran with him. She's happy to have the little black shadow who haunts the beech trees outside of Barbara's apartment. The city is as happy to have them as she has ever been happy to have Batman or Nightwing or Robin. He's not sorry for what he's done, but he's sorry that it's hurting his father. He can't meet Bruce's eyes. He can't see the disappointment there. Diana rests a hand on his shoulder. Diana has always been his protector and his champion. She won't reject him. She can't reject him. If she rejects him for this, he will continue doing it, but it will hurt. He needs this. He looks up, and she's smiling down gently. Even if Bruce hates him, he still has Diana. Diana will probably let him go home. She'll yell at him, and she'll train him, and she'll try to instill the virtues and values of the Amazons in him, until he regrets the decision to ever defend his city. But she won't give him up. Maybe because selfishness has always been one of Diana's vices, and, honestly, he doesn't mind. But before he can do that, he has to deal with the other gauntlet. A one-man gauntlet known as Dick Grayson. And really, why is Dick so incredulous that Jason can do this? He's Jason. Jason, who was valedictorian of his high school class, who got into Harvard and Yale and Columbia Princeton, and Oxford and Dartmouth, and who got into Georgetown and Notre Dame, and that weird school in Seattle that's half nurses and half queer Catholic boys. Jason, who turned down all of those places and took the scholarship to GSU because it was the better offer, and it kept him close to home. He's Jason, the one who volunteers at the Boys and Girls Club. Jason, who reads to the kids at Gotham Library. Jason, who helps fix up wheelchairs for people at the Gotham Bike Project. He's Jason, who publishes questionable poetry under a pseudonym. Jason, who is Alfred's favorite and Bruce's darling. Jason, who could never be the prodigal son. But, oh no, perfect Jason, somehow just as much of a prodigal son as the rest of them. And Jason swears to God, if Dick doesn't stop laughing, he's going to demonstrate just how violent the Red Hood can be. He's good at killing things, and he'd be happy to start with Dick's phone. And then his brother can be next. Fratricide is a fine tradition, and it's not like Damien and Tim haven't tried at least once. He's just evening the score, and Dick would totally deserve it, even though in the end, it's not Dick who matters. At least, not with this. He steels himself to face his father, the man who raised him, the man who loved his city in a way that means he gives it mercy and believes it can be better. The man who saw a broken, lonely boy and decided to save him. Because he could. The man who saved him again and again from his own stupidity, his fears and doubts. The man who promised that he could find a way out of the darkness of his mind. Jason wasn't ready to face his father's rejection. He braces himself as Batman comes over. Not just because the Zeta Tube landing jarred something and his body isn't sure it came back together entirely right. He can feel Bruce's disappointment, his anger, his frustration, his confusion, and his overwhelming love. Bruce gathers Jason into his arms, pulling him up and holding him steady, the way he has since Jason was 11 and angry. And now it's Bruce's turn to be angry. The embrace is brittle and frustrated and filled with porcupine spikes. But Jason relaxes into it anyway, because Bruce wouldn't hold him if he didn't care. Right? Bruce wouldn't support him and lower him carefully back into the chair if he didn't care. Bruce is disappointed. Bruce still loves him. But, oh, Bruce is angry, and they're going to talk about this when they get home, young man. And all Jason can think is he gets to go home. Notes. Questions, comments, non-grammatical concerns, or suggestions, all welcome. If you enjoyed this, you can go down to the description below and follow the link to the author's original work. You can leave them comments and kudos. If you enjoyed my reading, you can subscribe. Or, go down to the comments and tell me what else I should read. I will talk to the author and see if they're cool with it. Thank you for listening. I'm gonna call you Reverse, the person who recommended this fic to me. I do plan on also doing topics for impolite conversation, but it's on the longer end, so it will be added to my queue. which is so fucking long. My queue goes on for fucking years. But, until then,